Antichrist is a 2009 horror film written and directed by Lars von Trier. A man and a woman, unnamed throughout the narrative but credited as he and she, suffer the sudden and unexpected loss of their son, Nick. He fell out of a window while they were having sex. They grieve, but the woman appears to be in more pain than the man. The man counsels the woman, first at home, and then in a cabin in the forest called Eden. The woman resists, then pretends to be cured, then becomes violent. During this time, they encounter mysterious animals and other strange phenomena. She mutilates the man's genitalia and stabs him through the leg, pinning a grindstone to him. When he awakens, he tries and fails to remove it and begs her for help. She mutilates her own genitalia as well. After more conflict, the man is free and he strangles the woman. He burns her body and sees hundreds of women around him. There is a lot to unpack here, but it might be helpful to understand Lars von Trier himself before discussing this specific work. Von Trier and fellow Danish filmmaker Thomas Vinterberg founded an art movement in film called Dogma 95, a purposefully restrictive filmmaking technique and philosophy of cinema. Some limitations were simple enough, like shooting on location, which is not so radical considering it is part of a much older neo-realism. But other rules aimed to limit cinematography in a variety of ways to give their films greater authenticity at the expense of grandeur. Besides realism alone, the goal of Dogma 95 films, few of them adhering strictly to the rules by the way, forced the imaginations of the directors into new realms and new ideas. When you can't use the right tools, you have to improvise. Although he has since cast aside such rules, von Trier's work has remained a vessel for deconstruction. Dogville, for example, is a period piece without the grandiose trappings of the genre. Instead, a stripped-down production that resembles a theater rehearsal layered with a stage blueprint. Other carryovers from Dogma 95 remain, like handheld camera work. Structure is important. As a tool, the 3-act screenplay is useful and not something to be discarded. The conventions of film have become commonplace not because of mandate, but because of popularity and because of efficacy. Even von Trier's own Dogma 95 had its own rules, even if they were meant to be in defiance of the unofficial old rules of cinema. But von Trier's films purposefully cast a shadow of doubt on the rules of cinema, having us wonder what is integral and what is something that is unneeded, and therefore can be altered, reshaped, or even removed. I recently came across these images of paintings, and was reminded that destruction is actually a form of creation. When Lars von Trier destroys the art of old, he is not so much annihilating it as he is breaking it down and creating something else entirely. In his films, we are not seeing contempt for art, we are seeing admiration and imagination. This imagination takes us to strange places. Enter Antichrist. The term Antichrist is ancient. Von Trier often uses antiquated forms of words for his titles. Melancholia, an outdated medical term for depression, and nymphomaniac, another old term for sexual addiction that is no longer in use. Yet Antichrist's themes and ideas are modern: gender, sociology, and psychology. In the beginning of her ill-managed treatment, the man asks the woman, "What are you afraid of?" The man creates a pyramid chart of her fears, suggesting that immersing herself in her fear is the only way to help her. So he brings her to a cabin where she and her son spent time the previous summer while she was working on her dissertation. The man and the woman arrive at their plot of land in the forest called Eden. Its Judeo-Christian reference notwithstanding, the film's Eden is more Gnostic than Orthodox. Instead of a paradise of perfect harmony between humankind and nature, bathed in the loving warmth of God, the film's Eden is a place wherein the man and the woman wrestle with the idea that nature itself is evil. Satan's church, the woman says. And if everything is part of nature, then everything may be naturally evil. Antichrist suggests that there is nothing inherently nurturing about nature, and nothing magical about caring for one's young. Early in the film, we slowly zoom in on the bottom of flowers in water. Flowers, part of nature, bloom, but when we cut them, we hasten their death. We see constellations named after beings of antiquity, and in such legends, such mythologies, the gods were unkind, even violent, sometimes sexually violent, to their children. If our deities are revered in spite of their vengeance and wrath, then how, the film may posit, are we meant to follow that example? Nature is portrayed positively in fiction and poetry. Von Trier was fascinated by this assumption of the goodness of nature and incorporated it into his film. Antichrist is full of paradoxes and opposing forces. Nature and nurture, much like how the sun's left and right shoes are mixed up, left and right and wrong. If nature is evil in the film, then one might guess the opposite is also true, that nurture, the ways of humankind, can produce good, or at least a defense. That humankind is battling against nature, or perhaps God or gods. After all, stars, as shown in the film, do not choose to be together to naturally form our pictures of animals. Constellations are created by the observers as a subjective, unnatural process. The stars are natural, of course, but we connect the dots and outline the sky to suit our mythology. The man claims that the constellations that the woman describes do not exist, but they exist as much as any other made-up constellations. Gods from one mythology exist as much as gods from any other mythology, or not at all. The film is divided into chapters: grief, pain, despair, and the film's mythological term for them, the three beggars. These beggars can be seen as figurines in the boy's room, and in the aforementioned fictional constellations. Drawing once again from opposites of Christianity, the three beggars are like the opposites of three wise men of the New Testament, but instead of giving gifts to the Christ child, they take from their young. They devour. The topic of gender is broached in the film. Obviously. The stylized title makes the final letter the pictogram for woman, or Venus symbol. The woman had previously studied how women were labeled witches and blamed for the evils of the world. The term gynocide is used, referred to the wrongful killing of women. The woman's thesis is called this. The story of Eden in the book of Genesis is sometimes used as justification for this belief. Hearing this so much, it creates a kind of self-loathing for the woman. If the world continuously tells you that you are evil, it's hard to block it out every time. This research had adverse effects on her mind, as the rest of the narrative plainly shows. Antichrist confronts this idea, this toxic belief. The woman is clearly suffering from terrible guilt, and it is affecting her abnormally according to her doctor. Her real doctor, not her husband. But the man insists that he knows what is best, and arrogantly treats her himself with dubious therapy. It is explicitly stated that he is not actually a doctor. At a glance, the crazed behavior of the woman may make this film seem misogynistic, but it also seems as if the film wants us to wonder who is actually the more irresponsible in their actions. Could it be the man instead? He even burns her body at the end, like a witch. In the end, after killing his wife, the man is visited by hundreds of faceless women, perhaps those who have been wrongfully killed in the past due to the misunderstanding and condemnation of society. Antichrist gives us a narrative with no stable reality. We cannot tell the difference between the grounded world of the hospital, for example, and the mythological world of Eden. Because of that, the film is all that much more unsettling. There are restrictions on sex in Christian dogma. There is shame attached to it. This, coupled with their lovemaking related to their son's death, results in the mutilation of their genitalia. This appears to be commentary on the disproportional punishment of sin. In one scene, an animal exclaims, "Chaos reigns," and that may sum up Lars von Trier's film. In Christianity, humankind was given reign over the animals, but this animal claims otherwise. Chaos reigns. Humankind is not the master of nature. The film is a struggle between the chaos of the universe and the structure of human society, as well as the absence of knowing. a skepticism of prevailing ideas about right and wrong, a feeling that maybe God did not create the world, but someone or something else did. Something worse. Let's go back to destruction and creation. In Antichrist, von Trier attempted to make a horror movie. That was his initial goal. But after production, he claimed that the result was not a horror movie, but something else. Something that only used the skeleton of horror to tell a different kind of story. I would argue that Antichrist is still a horror film, in spite of the director's protestations, though. It is filled with dread. It horrifies. There are creatures and blood, and the tropiest of horror tropes, a cabin in the woods. But the final word on its classification may not be as important as the fact that we can debate said genre, and if that is true, then von Trier has succeeded in the tacit goal of nearly all his films: deconstruction of the conventions of film and reconstruction of something else. Thanks for watching the latest episode of Renegade Cut, everyone. If you want to support the show, you can click the orange link to my Patreon. That's how all of this happens. If you want to subscribe and never miss an episode, click on the red link. If you want to watch more, there are some recommended videos below. I'll see you next week for another episode.